Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Well, unfortunately, both the worlds of Hollywood and baseball lost a pair of legends yesterday. Not only two people who were immensely talented at their craft, but two people who, by all accounts, everyone says was just a heck of a nice guy. Now, one of them I got to know personally. The other one I felt like I got to know because so often his voice was narrating articles that I was reading, or it was my own internal narration because it was maybe the best voice there is. By now, you have guessed I am talking about James Earl Jones. Also, we lost New York Mets legend, baseball legend, the one and only Ed Kranepool. So who is in a position to talk about both baseball and Hollywood in a manner that really appreciates the contributions of both men? Well, who else but noted film critic, baseball historian, and best-selling author, the one and only Jeffrey Lyons. Jeffrey, it's great to talk to you.
I wish we were under happier circumstances.
Same here. Let me begin with James Earl Jones. He had so many great films, whether we talk about just Star Wars, whether we talk about Field of Dreams, whether we talk about comedies, dramas. He had such a breadth of incredible work. Give me your take on James Earl Jones's legacy as an actor, as a performer, and a person.
I knew James Earl Jones for about 20 years. I interviewed him about 6 times in various places, including the usual place when I was at WNBC and before that too at WPIX, and radio interviews. One time I had a radio interview scheduled with him, and I had thrown my back out, and he suggested, well, I'll do it on your bedside. So he came to our house. My wife, Judy, cooked some wonderful food, and we did the interview with me on my back with 2 cats that we had named Bob and Ray. and he was wonderful, and he even did my answering machine in the voice of Darth Vader. And a year later, I had another interview scheduled with him, and he insisted on doing it at our house again because he loved my wife's cooking. That's the kind of guy. This the great James Earl Jones. But the unique thing that I had with him was, remember a TV show called Biography?
Oh, sure, of course, loved it on A&E.
I wrote the biography of James Earl Jones for that show, and it necessitated A, weeks of research, and B, a 5-hour interview. My crew and I rented a suite at the Plaza Hotel, and for 5 hours we talked. We took a lunch break. I'd never done that long an interview with anybody. And when we got out of the interview, we went down the street, and everybody was on their cell phone. It was the day of the Oklahoma City bombings.
Wow.
And we were must have been the last people in the world to know what had happened because we were isolated and talking about his life. And we had a running joke. He was in Field of Dreams, of course, my favorite film of the 80s, and the Bingo Long All-Stars and Motor Kings, and he was in the Sandlot. They referred to Babe Ruth as George. first-name basis, and he also narrated When It Was a Game, that wonderful HBO series, and he's not a baseball fan, and I couldn't believe that, and I had a promise from him, which unfortunately will never be kept, that I would take him to his first game. I think his son finally did take him to a game, but he knew I loved the Red Sox, and there's a line in the play On Golden Pond, in the movie said by Henry Fonda, and on stage it was done in revival with James Earl Jones. And I don't know if you've ever seen the play, but they live in this family's in a summer house in Massachusetts somewhere, and he's reading the Boston Globe, and he grumbles, "Goddamn Red Sox," which is what I felt I felt that last night when they let the White Sox beat them. And we went to see him backstage. Whenever he was on Broadway, my wife and I would go back and pay our respects. And he saw me coming, and from must have been a half a block away, I heard the most famous voice in the world say, "Goddamn Red Sox."
That is hysterical. So, that's so much of what you just said is fascinating. So even though he was in Field of Dreams, where he's got that great speech about baseball.
People will come, Ray.
You're broke, Ray. You sell now or you lose everything.
The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come.
Even though he was in the Sandlot, even though he did the narration for When It Was a Game, he actually was not a baseball fan, and I think until recently had never even been to a baseball game. Is that right?
If his son took him, and I read maybe, other than that, he had a promise. There's a book about Fenway Park. You can open it up, and it pops up, from the pages of the book. And in the back, my friend David Fisher, who wrote it, printed the fact that he had promised me that I could take him to his first baseball game.
Wow, that is
and he was
incredible.
A gentle man. And, he auditioned for The Great White Hope, and they didn't hire him. And he went home and he shaved his head, and he came back the next day, and they thought it was a different actor and hired him.
So you mentioned The Great White Hope. I think he was the last living actor from Dr. Strangelove. We've already talked about some of his other films. If you had to pick, it doesn't matter the genre, a favorite James Earl Jones film of yours, what would you pick?
Well, it would be Field of Dreams, of course, my favorite film of the 80s. And in Dr. Strangelove, he kept saying negative function. He was a member of the crew. He was also on the show You'll Never Get Rich, the Phil Silver's comedy in the early days. He was one of the guys in the group there in the back.
In terms of, obviously a whole new generation of fans has gotten to know him as Darth Vader, but it's interesting, he wasn't even in the credits for the first two Star Wars movie. Do you know anything about that? Why was he not in the credits, even though it's difficult to imagine Darth Vader without that booming James Earl Jones voice?
We must have covered that in the 5 hours we spoke, but I can't remember. I will tell you this. He was a stutterer. And as you know, Shirley, you never get rid of your stutterer, but you learn to control it. President Biden is a stutterer. He was born in Arctobutla, Mississippi, and moved to Manistee, Michigan. This is off the top of my head, by the way. And he went out. He lived on a farm, and at night he would go out and read poetry to farm animals, and claimed that was how he was able to control his stutter.
Wow, that is incredible. And if you only know him through his work, whether it's narrating, CNN or Bell Atlantic payphones, you would never guess that he had any difficulty speaking.
Absolutely. And Field of Dreams is my favorite James Earl Jones film. But there are so many others, too. And he was gracious to the other members of the cast on Broadway. He was a big star, and he knew it, but he never acted like it. He was a real gentleman, just a special person. I treasure our friendship.
I imagine he did pretty well in terms of acting over the years. A lot of other people that had achieved his degree of fame, and I imagine some degree of fortune, probably would have retired before their 90s. He stayed active, really.
He liked it. Look at De Niro keeps making movies. Some good, some bad.
I always hear from De Niro that it's more of a financial situation because of a bad divorce and things like that. I don't know if that was at play with James Earl Jones, was it?
No, it wasn't. But he loved the process of acting. He was born for that, and maybe because he overcame a stutter and nobody thought he would be able to be an actor, that he kept proving them again and again that they were wrong.
At 30 minutes after the hour, you're listening to The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is the one and only Jeffrey Lyons, talking about a couple of legends we lost in the last 24 to 48 hours. Last question about James Earl Jones, and then I want to chat with you about Ed Kranepool. He was someone that seemed incredibly kind to everybody that he worked with. And clearly the fact that he developed such a personal relationship with you, in a relationship that originally started as an interviewer situation, it would seem to say that a lot of the stories about James Earl Jones being such a nice guy, that they're all true. As far as you know, did he ever face any kind of racism? I mean, it's difficult to imagine now, but he was born in the 30s, and the country was very much a divided place, especially when he was born, I think, in Mississippi.
Arctabutla, Mississippi, yes. And then he grew up in Manistee, Michigan. So he didn't face racism that I know of to the same degree as probably still exists in the Deep South, more subtly, of course. But that was not part of his DNA. At least we never spoke of that. Mm-hmm. But I will say he got into a contract dispute or a copyright dispute with the people when he played Paul Robeson, another great African-American or black man who had more talent than almost anybody of his time. And James Earl played him, and there was a dispute with Paul Robeson's son. I think he was hurt by that. But other than that, never a bad word of anybody. And when we went backstage with each time, you would think it was the most exciting thing of his day. I mean, that's the kind of charm and charisma that he had.
No, that's so nice to hear, because you hear so many stories of
and
folks
that go
the other way.
He was an Emmy, Oscar, Tony, and what am I leaving
Grammy.
out?
Grammy. He's an EGOT.
He's in that group, yep.
Now, I was wondering, because I heard some people say that he was an EGOT. Other folks said it doesn't count because the Oscar is only honorary. Do you count him?
It counts. Douglas got an honorary Oscar, too. He's Oscar winner James Earl Jones. Leave it at that.
I remember in the 90s, there was an incident where it was announced that James Earl Jones had died. I think it was at some sporting event. And then they found out, everyone was relieved that it was actually James Earl Ray who had died.
Talk about a difference. Can you imagine?
Exactly.
Talk about a difference. He once was giving a performance, and he heard, his father was an actor. His father was in The Sting, and he was giving a performance on stage. For many or some years, he was estranged from his father, and he was performing one night, and he heard a laugh in the theater, and he knew that was his father's laugh.
That's crazy. First of all, I didn't realize that his dad was in The Sting. I've seen that film so many times, but I didn't realize that.
Robert Earl Jones.
Yeah. Is there a James Earl Jones film that's worth checking out that maybe doesn't immediately come to mind when folks think of James Earl Jones? Is there kind of a sleeper hit?
The Bingo Long All-Stars and Motor Kings about the Negro Leagues, also with Richard Pryor in it. You can't do better than that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so that's a sleeper
it's a
for me.
very wonderful comedy. So not many movies have been made about the so-called Negro Leagues, but he was wonderful in that. But he just was not a baseball fan, and here I come and talking Red Sox to him, and he loved it. He loved the fact that we were like these two opposites attracted. I was very privileged to know him.
If you're just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is the one and only Jeffrey Lyons. All right, let's talk baseball. New York Mets legend Ed Kranepool, who, unlike a lot of other people that may end up playing for the Mets and Yankees, was actually from New York, a lifelong New Yorker, a fascinating guy. Right. I got to meet him a couple of times, and he really will always live on in Met lore because of his incredible contributions to that 1969 Miracle Mets team. You knew Ed Kranepool personally.
Yeah, not well. We met a couple of times at the BAT dinner. That's the Baseball Assistants Team dinner, which they used to have every year. And every table has a former player at the dinner. And I said to him, I'm 3 days older than you. And here it is, September 1962. You were just called up for the Mets. And I'm sitting in Columbia University my freshman year. I was later to transfer to Penn because Columbia had it was not co-ed then. And the teacher was droning on about German history, Middle European history, and I'm sure it's a wonderful subject. And I'm looking out the window saying, the Cincinnati Reds are in town. I wonder if Bob Perky's going to face Kranepool. Is going to show him the curveball. And and he loved that. It got me through that class. And, he was 3 days younger than I am. 3 days younger. And he was, I said, I'd like to trade places with you that day so badly.
It's interesting. I know he's had some health issues over the years, and he had a very public search for, I believe it was a kidney transplant. And he seemed like a great guy. I met him several times, and I have not met anybody, either a fan or an athlete or a journalist, that has a bad word to say about him. As far as his playing career, though, goes, I'll ask you because you were contemporaries in terms of age. He was one of the youngest players ever to play for the Mets. I think he got called up to the major leagues in 1962 at 17 years old.
I know, and I was so jealous.
Do you think that he would have been better served by another season or two of seasoning in the Mets minor league system?
Then he wouldn't have played 1,800 or 1,953 games.
Right.
And by the way, I don't know if you knew this or not. I know you're a big Mets fan. He hit home runs off 3, 4, 5, 6 Hall of Famers. He hit 2 off Bob Gibson, 1 off Juan Marichal, 2 off Jim Bunning, 1 off Phil Negro, 1 of Gaylord Perry, 3 off Gaylord Perry, and 3 off Ferguson Jenkins. Not bad.
I did not know that.
And he faced 500 pitchers. I did my homework.
After attending James Madison High School, to be able to play for your hometown team for the next almost 20 years, it's
like
incredible. And I think he's the longest tenured player in Mets history, which is just incredible.
Second is David Wright.
And
David Wright is about 300 games behind him.
It's interesting that he was a part of that 1962 Mets team who, at least until the White Sox get finished with this season, that was the worst Mets team of all time. And then to be part of that 1969 Miracle Mets team, other than Gil Hodges wearing the manager's uniform, I don't know that anybody else was a part of both teams.
That's right. And, I saw the 62 Mets play. I took a girl to a date to a game early in the season, and up steps Richie Ashburn in his last year of his Hall of Fame career. I said, baseball is an amazing game. Here's a guy who's never hit home, and boom, he hits a home run. Later in the game, I said, you'll never see him hit, boom, he hits another home run. You just never know with baseball. And he was there. He was a historic player. And, the hitting coach for the Mets first year was Rogers Hornsby. And he went home in that winter and he died. After what he had seen on the diamond, who can blame him?
But Ed Kranepool, definitely an interesting guy.
Good player for a lot of years and stayed with one team. That never happens anymore.
Yeah, and you know what? He really stayed involved in the broader Mets community. He would come back, when Margot Katzmatidis threw out the first pitch at the Brooklyn side back and was part of that game. He would come back and always participate in old-timers style events and things of that nature. He seemed to really enjoy Mets culture, and I have no doubt that part of that was growing up in New York.
Absolutely. My son Ben threw out the first pitch at a White Sox game, and Mark Burley was catching, and okay, who's this kid? And my son shook off a sign, and Burley got really angry at that.
All right, so we chatted about losing James Earl Jones and Ed Kranepool. One thing that I know our New York area listeners will be interested in is you have been heard on WCBS 880 for many, many years with Lyons Den Radio. That was really, for a lot of years, you were the reason that I kept tuning to that station.
Thank you.
Give me your thoughts on that station, not only flipping formats, but ceasing to exist for the first time in 6 decades.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. We have the same company owns 2 all news shows, but they're very different. I'm trying to get used to WINS, but they're very different stations. And I look at it like one is the Daily News and the other is the New York Times. It was, on the hourlies, on the CBS hourlies now, I tune in on my smart speaker to BBM in Chicago or KNX in Los Angeles to hear CBS network news. And Odyssey just ran it to the ground, say some people. I don't know the reason why, but it's a terrible thing. It really was. In this day and age, we need more news sources, not fewer news sources, and a lot of some of the talented people are still heard on WINS, but a lot of them are not going to be there, and there's great talent. I worked there on and off for 30-odd years, and starting in 1975, and I left and I went to NBC, and I came back. And the new format they had was pretty interesting, but it's gone now, and I just think that's a dangerous thing, especially nowadays.
Lastly, let me ask you about the movie business. The top movie at the box office this year was Beetlejuice, a sequel to a film that came out 36 years ago.
I know.
The number 2 film, which had been number 1 at the box office for the last few weeks, was Wolverine versus Deadpool, or Deadpool versus Wolverine.
Can you imagine that?
Well, so a lot of folks are always complaining that the only thing Hollywood churns out are sequels and remakes. And by the looks of things, the popular audiences really seem to like some of these sequels. Is the problem a lack of creativity, or is it the problem?
Lack of creativity, rising cost of making movies. People don't want to take risks. But at least, first of all, it's a great time to be an actor because of all the other outlets, Hulu and Paramount Plus and Netflix, of course. But I think there is a lack of creativity, and that's why if you make a smaller budget film with a daring subject matter, that's the thing to seek out, not just every year another superhero movie or every year another sequel. The business is changing. People don't go out as much. They have flat screen TVs, and they have movies that go right to streaming. And it's I wouldn't buy a movie theater. I wouldn't invest in a movie theater or something like that because I don't know that I hope I'm wrong, but I don't know that they'll be around in 5 or 10 years. I don't know. It's a changing business, and it doesn't please me.
That it is. I mentioned the 36-year gap between Beetlejuice movies. I know that there was a lengthy gap of 20-something years between The Hustler and The Color of Money. I know with Evening Star, in terms of endearment, there was a big gap between sequels. Does that ever, can you think of anything greater than a 36-year gap between a first film and a sequel film?
Well, in baseball terms, Rusty Staub and Ty Cobb hit home runs as teenagers and after 40. Does that count?
It counts. Always back to baseball. I love it. Hey, I was pleased to see the Red Sox let the Mets win a couple of games recently.
I'm a little upset with my Red Sox. My good friend Rich Hill is 44 years old, and he made it back to the Red Sox the second half of the year, and they gave him 3 quick appearances, and he did well in one and not so well in the others, and they designated him for assignment right away. And that bothered me. It's a tough business. It really is. It's a rough business, and even if you love a team, sometimes you can disagree with them.
That you can. Jeffrey Lyons, it is always a treat to chat with you. If people are interested in any of your stories about baseball or about the interesting characters that you have encountered along the way, they should absolutely check out your books. They're available on Amazon. There's Hemingway and Me, which chronicles anecdotes and memories of a life-changing friendship. There's Stories My Father Told Me, Notes from the Lyons Den, all about your father, Leonard Lyons, and that great column that he used to write, and also a lot of great baseball trivia books as well. And I look forward to your next one, as always, Jeffrey.
Frank, thanks. You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I always appreciate your willingness to come on, even when it's late at night. Thank you. The great Jeffrey Lyons. If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, give me a call, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.